Fellowship of the Great Physician welcomes you to House Call. Our hosts today are doctors of chiropractic, Dr. Gerald Bala, and Dr. Richard Jensen, who is also a board-certified acupuncturist, practice independently in Shoreland, Minnesota. Let's join our hosts for today's program that will assist you in your
Welcome to House Call. I'm Dr. Gerald Lala.
And I'm Dr. Richard Jensen.
It's wonderful to have you with us today. We're going to have a great program. We're going to talk about some facts and some fallacies. We're going to talk about buyer beware. Pretty positive show. Lots of times we want to talk, not us, but people will do programs that pat themselves on the back. But sometimes we need to look at some of the fallacies that go on as well as facts that go on, particularly in the natural health industry. I mean, there's many things that are done in orthodox medicine that are kind of out on the far edge, and they attract people who want to make some money, who are going to be dispensers of them, as well as people who are in some very sad and very serious health problems. And so they're going to go off and try all kinds of things, and of course many of their health issues are very serious, and so they're reaching out for any kind of hope. And it's a very understandable thing. But very often it takes state and governmental agencies a long time to catch up with these charlatans, and often by the time they do catch up with them, they're gone or out of business or just have disappeared. For example, coral calcium was one of those issues several years ago. You know, those of us who are science-based in the natural health care profession knew that it was a bunch of baloney. It just was. But they had all kinds of people all whipped up in it and things of that nature. And so just because Dr. Jensen and I are licensed as doctors of chiropractic by the state of Minnesota doesn't necessarily mean that the only time we could get in trouble is if we did something way out of line and it became public or became an issue with, say, the Board of Chiropractic Examiners, and that's true with medicine and dentistry. But very often it takes a long time for the legal process, those wheels to turn, and very often the doctor gets out of that trouble, and there is no official reprimand or anything like that. And very often, even when there is a reprimand, people aren't aware that that's public information then, and they can go out on that particular doctor's web, or the license and agency of that doctor, and go out on the website and see those things. So we're going to look about charlatans, what you see often promoted, particularly in the wellness care, alternative health care. On the outside does not necessarily mean that the person is honest or credible. And one of the first things we're going to look at now, Dr. Jensen is going to take a look at one of the issues that's going on in society now that we don't find credible information on to substantiate its use.
Right, and what we have is called the aqua detox. And what we have here is a picture of the before and after of this aqua detox. As you can see, what is happening is they place the person's feet into a bath of some kind of a salt water type structure, and I mean, they do add chemicals to this bath, so it's just not plain water. And they have an electrode that's in there, and as time goes by, it's usually over about the course of 40 minutes, that this bath water starts to change and it starts to foam, and it looks really impressive. Actually, it looks very impressive from the sludge that forms, and supposedly that sludge is all the toxins being drained out from the body through the feet. And so
that's their contention.
That's their contention. That's a low voltage electrode, and through that array, a dark cylindrical object that you saw in the middle there, which a wire is attached. They contend that apparatus produces a frequency of positive and negative ions, which gently resonates through the body and stimulates all the cells within it. and it rebalances the cellular energy. And that enables the cells to release any toxins that have built up in them, and therefore those toxins are supposed to then be released through the soles of your feet into this bath, and that's supposedly what you're seeing. However, another way to interpret this is that the changing color of the water is due to a catalytic reaction between the iron and the other minerals, which is the salt water, and the electrical current that's going on in the machine.
Therefore, there are researchers who contend that there is no detoxification in the body whatsoever.
Right.
But they still come along and say, well, certain colors of the water mean that there's certain organs being detoxified.
This is what the users of the machine will say.
Right.
They will say that when the water has a yellow color, that when it has a yellow color, that it's actually the liver or the gallbladder or the bowel that's being detoxified, and that those toxins are being drawn out.
And there's no scientific evidence to prove that putting people in a salt water with an electrode in the water is going to cleanse out their liver or gallbladder.
I have not seen persuasive evidence that that is occurring. Neither when I've approached people who use this machine, when I've told them, hey, how about you do a before and after test to see what the toxic mineral analysis would be on a person before they had this bath and after they've had this bath, or even a number of treatments with this bath.
And they usually sell a package of treatments with it.
They usually sell a package of treatments
prepaid.
with it. And none of them ever take me up on that. None of them ever will, because if it doesn't come out right, then they've lost a stream of revenue.
Right.
Or at least now it becomes unethical for them to have that stream of revenue, because now they have knowledge. One of the other things, when we look at the orange and brown color, they say that that's the joints. That's where the detoxification.
And the white, when the water is turned white, that indicates that there's lymphatic detoxification going on?
Correct. Correct. That's what they're saying.
So yellow is liver, gallbladder.
Right.
White is lymphatic system detoxification, and orange would be for joint problems.
Right, and the list goes on. The green, dark brown, black is also the gallbladder or the bowels. Okay, so it's just a deeper detoxification. Red is from blood clots, is what they say. Black flecks are from heavy metals. And white cheese-like look to it is yeast, for a yeast infection type thing. Well, then what you can look at is the rust coloring of the water is caused by oxidation of iron rather than the toxins. Could be another way of looking at this.
And our source there is Stephen Barrett, MD, who runs an organization called Device Watch.
Correct, correct. And he has some references there on the Aqua Detox.
And probably be a good idea to list them too, huh?
Sure. The Aqua Detox, that was from December 27th, 2004. The American Cancer Society from 1994.
And this goes way back to 1994.
Yes, it does.
Now, the American Cancer Society would not be against something that was detoxifying the body and therefore preventing or ridding the body of cancer. There would be no reason. You can come along and say, well, all the oncologists would be against it because they wouldn't be making money from surgery and chemotherapy. Well, folks, these oncologists aren't that way, And some of the other references would be the Apothecary's Drawer, the weblog, May 2004, so see it's been around a long time, and then Goldacre, Be Rusty Results, and that was printed in the Guardian Unlimited in September of 2004. Usually, this treatment consists of 8 prepaid treatment or 12 prepaid treatments. I've never seen an insurance, Medicare, or Medicaid pay for it. And it is contraindicated now, especially contraindicated with people who have pacemakers, are taking heart medications, have diagnosed cardiac arrhythmia or unequal heartbeat, or are taking Coumadin. It is also contraindicated in anyone who's had an organ transplant, or any medication that affects electrolytes. And Dr. Jensen, what are electrolytes?
Electrolytes are, they're metals in the body that have electrical properties where they give up electrons or they take electrons back that help the energy processes in the body. And literally, I mean electricity in the body that's formed across the different membranes of the body that help the reactions take place that are life themselves. And so when we're looking at electrolytes, they're highly regulated within the body because they're used for that. Electrolytes are what help the nervous system, which is electrically mediated, to cause your muscles to contract, to cause them to relax, to cause your heart to pump. All these things electrolytes are very, very useful for.
And how does this instrument delineate between good electrolytes and toxic metals? See, it doesn't, it can't.
No.
So if it was going to pull out toxins, it would pull out the good electrolytes with it as well.
Right. All it's doing is effectively saying that we're applying a charge and that charge is going to pull these things out.
Could you bring that slide back up of that Aqua Detox again?
Sure.
Let's take a look at that again, and I'll give you here we go. If you have had treatment with this instrument and you wonder if, and you've paid for the treatment, and you wonder if it was valid, you have a couple courses of action. One is you could ask for that chiropractor, massage therapist, or nutritionist, whoever, to give you your money back. Number two is you could type an email or send, it can be an anonymous letter if you like, to the, let's say it's a chiropractor, you could send that to the, if it's in Minnesota or whatever state it might be in, you send it to that respective state practitioners, chiropractic board of examiners, to their nutritional board, or their licensing agency, a massage therapist, and say, look, I had these treatments, I don't think it was right. Is this a legitimate scientific instrument? Number three is you could always file a claim that this was a fraudulent instrument that was used on you. You thought because the person was a licensed, whatever part of the health industry they're part of, and that it was wrong and that you were misguided in thinking that it was going to help you. Now, if in fact this instrument is not a scientific tool, if it is not due exactly, in other words, if independent scientific analysis has proved that it doesn't do what the sellers of it are claiming, then that's called fraud. And the only way that you can stop fraud is to file a complaint. And it's not going to get you in any trouble or anything. It's not going to embarrass you or anything like that. But that's the only way you can stop it. And because so much of this wellness industry and this alternative healthcare industry is unregulated, and I'm not a proponent of regulation, but regulations have their good effect. And very often, using things like this are detrimental to the patient. And also, it could very much delay proper medical or legitimate treatment. In other words, you could lose health in the process. So just because I'm doing something or using some kind of diagnostic or treatment tool or instrument doesn't mean that it's legitimate. And the only way that, for example, my chiropractic board of examiners can ever do anything about it is for somebody to file a complaint about it. Now, we've looked at as much as we could, and it doesn't look to us like it's science-based. But of course, there's tons of information out there, and the people who are selling it to say that it is. But the only ones who can really determine if it is or not is a peer review committee.
There is a lot of information out on this out on the internet, and you can watch movies of people, because lay people have purchased these machines for themselves, for their own use. And one of the interesting one that I saw was a gentleman who's been doing this to his whole family, and he marvels that he does it once a week for his family to keep them detoxified. And he marvels that no matter how many times he does this to the people in his family, the water still comes out with the same amount of gunk in it that is still pulling out the toxins. Or it's not, and it's the chemicals, the salts that you're putting into the water, and that it's just having the same reaction over and over and over again, and it's really not doing anything to the body.
And I've even heard where certain Christian groups are saying that if you come in for this treatment, it will take that all that gunk coming out are demons coming out of your body. Those aren't demons coming out of your body, for crying out loud, get real. Well, let's take another factor fallacy point, retake of full spine x-rays. This would be principally a chiropractic issue where chiropractors make full spine x-rays, meaning that the x-ray is from here down to the end of the tailbone, and there's usually a front to back one and sometimes a side to side one. We call that front to back one an AP or anterior posterior, and the side one is called a lateral full spine x-ray. They are legitimate x-rays, but they are not considered by orthodox chiropractors and orthodox medical community as diagnostic x-rays. They are in fact postural x-rays. Now there's certainly, a chiropractor should have interest in a patient's posture, but you can, let's say that I come in and I've got a muscle spasm, I'm going to look pretty crooked on that, and they can say, boy, oh boy, you have really got a bad curvature, you really need lots of treatment. Now, sometimes what they do after that is they'll go and make a retake x-ray in a short period of time, and they say, oh, look how much your spine is straightened. And when in fact it may not have straightened at all. And the reason for that, Dr. Jensen?
Well, here's the thing. They're measuring things in millimeters, which is a very fine measurement. Mm-hmm. Now, unless they have your feet in the exact same place as they took it the first time, unless they have them at the same angle that they took it the first time, unless they've counted the vertebrae and found exactly where that central beam was going through the first time they took that.
You might explain what a central beam is.
A central beam is
like
when you're taking an x-ray, you have, basically the x-rays are coming out of a source, which is, like a flashlight. And they're shining it towards your body and with the x-ray film behind it, okay? Now, if you're taking, say, of the fingers here, let's just say, and we have the central beam here, then we're having a more direct look at it. But if we're doing that from taking the full body, and say the full body is, the pelvis down here, or the hips and the head, and they've got the central beam here, well, guess what? That flashlight, the beam of that flashlight is coming up this way. And an x-ray taken with the beam going through this way is going to be totally different from it going through this way. It's going to take curves that are there this way and make them straight when it's coming up this way. So therefore, when they say, oh, you've lost some cervical curve, it's more of a fabrication of how the x-ray was taken. Now, second of all, when we're talking about the central beam, if you're relating this x-ray to another x-ray in millimeters, you have to know that on my sleeve that the first time I took it, it went through this button, okay? Now, the next time you take this x-ray, you have to make sure that that central beam has gone through that button in order for those millimeters to make any sense at all.
Which is nearly impossible.
Nearly impossible.
Unless it was instant, taken right instant after the first one.
Yeah, without them moving.
Without them moving.
And even with them breathing, it can change.
Mm-hmm. So in other words, there are, or can be, some unscrupulous chiropractors who are trying to build, they follow certain coaches and management systems that say, come in and get these people in, get this full spine x-ray made, and then re-x-ray them, and then show them how much better their spine is. Now, it's one thing if that spine, in fact, has improved, and very often chiropractic care does that. We have no doubt about that. But for me to maliciously go and know how to change that angle of that central beam to make that spine look better so I can say, see how great I am? See how great I am. See all what I've done for you. And that's wrong. That's wrong. Now, usually what happens with these kind of people who are doing this is very often they're advertising free or discounted x-rays. Now you say, hey, anytime I can get my oil in my car changed cheaper, that's a better deal. Certainly it's a better deal. We all want to save money. But usually you're not saving any money, because when something's free, generally the quality and the value goes down with it, because they start cutting corners. So generally, where there's advertising of free or discounted examinations or x-rays, that's a red flag. Secondly, it's not illegal to give free x-rays or examinations, but it may indicate the possibility of the DC lacking business. In other words, if I'm a good doctor, I'm going to have business. There's no doubt about it. But if I'm not doing a good job, then I'm not going to have good business. So the motivation then could be money or playing the insurance game or bait and switch, meaning that come in, it'll be just $20 or $40, and then when I find out that you have insurance, I say, oh, gee, we need to do more studies. Oh, yes, we need to do more studies. Your condition is a lot more serious. Well, my condition hasn't changed whatsoever. They're just saying it is, so it's called bait and switch. Then you have to be cautious of those people who say there's no need to pay the copay. In the state of Minnesota, where we practice, it's against the law not to collect the copay. But what many doctors are doing is the doctor will say he or she will not collect your copay. You say, gee, I won't have to pay the $4 or the $10 or the $12 or the $20, and actually these copays are just increasing and increasing. Many of these copays are now higher than what we charge for an average cash visit. So not collecting the copay is against law, and the patient is as guilty as the doctor because the patient knows that the doctor is not going to collect it. All right, so there's two people involved in fraud there. Next, health insurance abuse. Often the doctor will say he or she will take what the insurance pays, but still has forms that very often the patient isn't given the opportunity to read, that has the patient sign that says the patient will pay for services not reimbursed by the insurance. So it's one thing to be honest and say, look, you have to pay for what your insurance won't pay for. But it's dishonest or to imply that the opposite of that. Another thing to be very, very careful of, business relationships. So Dr. Jensen and I practice in the same facility, but they're two independent, separate practices. His practice is separate from mine, mine is separate from his. Whatever his practice does in his practice, whatever his income is, I have no idea, where there's no cross-referencing whatsoever. So very often these doctors, though, will have a cozy business relationship where there's kickbacks, where there's referral relationships with another doctor, with another physical therapist, with a massage therapist, with attorneys or other healthcare providers, such as I said, a physical therapist. And sometimes it's with an equipment company or a diagnostic x-ray lab. Very often what that involves is they will say, the x-ray company says, we'll bring in like a big semi-truck that's converted into an x-ray lab. And they say to the doctor, look, if you get a bunch of patients set up for x-rays, MRIs is a real common thing today, and if you get all these patients set up, then we'll take all these MRIs or these x-rays, whatever tests you order. And they say to the doctor, the truck is parked out in the parking lot, and they say to the doctor, look, what we will do is we will pay you rent we'll have a little office in your office where we sit down with the patient that's going to be x-rayed and we get some history on them and then we take them out to the truck and make the MRI. There's nothing wrong with that except one is we really don't know if the patient's condition justifies making those x-rays. We don't know that. And the only way we know that is if the doctor has done the proper diagnostic workup to substantiate that. Number two is very often what these mobile x-ray units will try to do is they'll say to Dr. Lala, now we're going to take this space here and it's an 8x10 room, and what we're going to do is we're going to pay you $1,000 or $500 a square foot. Well, I suppose if you were in Rockefeller Center, you might be paying $1,000 a square foot or something like that. But let's say that the rent in my clinic, I don't know what it is. Let's say it's $35 a square foot or something like that. I suppose that's a possibility. I don't know. I don't ever see that. And they come along and say to me, we're going to pay you $45, $55, or $65 or $100 a square foot. That is illegal. It's a kickback. Now, you, as the patient, may not necessarily know that. But it is still in part your responsibility, because if that's going on, we should know about that and not allow ourselves to be caught up in that fraudulent business. Secondly, then, very often little to no diagnostic or little to no time is spent on past or present medical history. In other words, if somebody's running you through, what's wrong? Hello, I'm Dr. Lala. What's wrong with you? Oh, you got a backache? All right, bend this way and that. All right, we need to make some x-rays. Or get on the table, we'll take care of your back. Now, that is not considered by any licensing agency, be it medical or chiropractic, to be an adequate medical history. So when there's little to no examination, or there's a rush to x-ray and or treatment, or where there's a propensity that insurance will pay for it, you have to be very careful. Now let's talk about another issue that it could be a possibility. No x-rays. Look, just come in, we'll move you around this way. Oh yeah, there's some stuff out of here. I got some instrument, it gives me so I don't know, some kind of heat reading. And oh yeah, there's a problem here, get on the table, you need these treatments. Not all conditions need x-ray. Not all of them do. But when x-rays are not made, the likelihood of misdiagnosis, the likelihood of wrong diagnosis, and the likelihood of wrong treatment increases. In other words, the risk management barometer in your case with the doctor should be as low as possible. That's why Mayo Clinic does a lot of tests. It decreases the risk management barometer of them making a mistake. It also increases the likelihood of them making an adequate diagnosis. So when there's no x-rays, the risk management barometer of malpractice, of mistreatment, dramatically increases. Now, we talked a little bit about full spine x-rays. It's fine to make full spine postural x-rays, but appropriate, Dr. Jensen mentioned here briefly one word, appropriate, acceptable regional x-rays. It is one thing to have a full spine x-ray of me, but if I should have with that an open mouth x-ray, a separate one. Now some of them will say, well, I did that when I was taking the full spine x-ray, I have them open their mouth. I have the patient open their mouth. That's not adequate because something could be missed. So there are footprints. If you go into any radiology textbook in medical school or chiropractic school, and then a dental school for jaws and teeth problems, they have what is supposed to be adequate. And often they say, well, it's not going to cost much, so we'll do it this way. You never save money that way, you don't. Now, there's also a thing we mentioned very briefly called voodoo nutrition, which involves selling or prescribing diets or food supplements without universally acceptable scientific tests. There's also people that we call pressure practitioners. This is Dr. Personality, big shot, big ego, talks of his or her accomplishments and success, is a big backslapper, high pressure, sales and pushy. Be very, very careful.
I just found out that high pressure sales thing, where they say time is limited, that you got to make the decision now. I just found out that's known as the Benjamin Franklin type of
I've never
sales.
heard of that.
Yep, it dates all the way back to Benjamin Franklin. And so what we're looking at is some other things of water filters.
Yeah.
Just it's buyer beware. There needs to be some common sense in these things. And sometimes you may not be fully informed about some of the things to look at. Like that foot bath thing, it looks good. It's just there's different interpretations of it. And so it may not be doing exactly what they say it does, but it looks good. It looks good. You see more gunk in there than it was.
We're not saying that people who do these things are necessarily bad, but they better have adequate case history to substantiate what they're doing. And if they haven't done that on you, your possibility of you getting involved in fraudulent issues is highly possible. It really is. So buyer beware, be very careful, go with good people.